What we're going to be doing today, which is a little bit different to normal, is we're going to be having a critical conversation with our HMI inspectors, which is on partnership links to attendance, and that is how we're going to start this session off. We will be taking some questions, and we would ask that any questions you have, if you could add them to the comments section. And we will be taking them from there. In that respect, if you see a colleague who's put up a question that you particularly like or you particularly want answered, if you could also maybe put a thumbs up to that question so we can see the most popular ones and we can pull those out. We will probably only have time for a couple of questions, so we won't have time for a lot. And the last part of the session is going to be showcasing some brand new partnership resources which are going to be published tomorrow at 8 o'clock in the morning. So we're giving you a little bit of a preview to what will be launched tomorrow morning at 8 o'clock. So without further ado, we have got the recording started. We'll just get the last couple of people into the lobby. Okay, so our first part of the session is we're just going to start introducing ourselves. So what I'll do is I'll go around the call today so that we can all introduce who we are. So my name is Laura Starkey. I'm a CLD officer here at Education Scotland. And if I could ask Sheila, could you introduce yourself, please?
Hi, yeah, I'm Sheila Brown, HMI.
Great, and Jamie?
Hi there, everybody. I'm Jamie Dungavel, an Education Officer for CLD as well in Education Scotland.
Great, and Andrea?
Good afternoon, folks. I'm Andrea McMillan, and I'm also an HMI.
Right, that's brilliant. And Jamie, I think you're going to kick us off today.
Yes, and thanks everybody for joining. Hopefully you enjoy the content. We've got a couple of questions we're going to go through, and our inspectors are hopefully going to give you some insight in what partnership can look like and some ways that it can support attendance. So my first question is, can you tell us, Sheila and Andrea, some of the about the kinds of contributions partners are making across the country that make an impact on attendance?
Thanks, Jamie. I'll go first on that, if that's all right, and then I'll hand over to Sheila. I think it's important to say that we see a range of programmes delivered by partners that are impacting on attendance. Sometimes they are set programmes, sometimes they are bespoke to young people, and they can be delivered in school, and we also see them delivered off-site. They could look at the vocational aspirations of young people, you know, what they want to achieve for a job or a career, or sometimes they're matched to their interests. There are partnerships across the country with local sports clubs and organisations that are helping to re-engage young people, and we see quite a lot of that. Some of the programmes are accredited as well, so we see specific awards such as the Saltire Award or John Muir or Duke of Edinburgh. I think the most successful partnerships are the ones where the outcomes are well understood at the beginning. So if attendance is something that the school and the partners are looking to impact on, it's important to understand that at the beginning and be upfront with young people about that. And that includes thinking about those outcomes as they would appear in your local strategic plans or within school improvement plans. So there's a wide variety, I think, of programmes tailored and off the shelf that we see. I mean, for example, I know of one school that has a hairdressing salon on site through a partnership with a local business. I'm sure you've got other examples, Sheila.
Yeah, I mean, I think similarly, I've seen in a couple of secondary schools using like a barista type of arrangement for young people, which is a bit of partnership work, and often through, for example, the Princess Trust, where young people are learning those skills and getting them re-engaged. I think the thing, you know, to reflect on this question, that if we're thinking about work between schools and youth work, for example, to build on what Andrea said, it's important to have that clarity about what it is you're trying to achieve at the beginning. And I think it's important, if you can, to have some sort of dedicated space in the school. Now, that can be an area that's set aside. Where I think it works best in terms of what I've seen is where there's a dedicated space where youth workers are based, who can then work with the school and work with young people, particularly that young people know where they are, how to access them, and to be clear about what it is they're working on. I think there needs also to be, again, to build on what you said, Andrea, that joint planning and evaluation, so people are clear if it's about improving attendance or improving attainment or improving young people's self-esteem or whatever it is. It has to be clear, I think, what it is we're actually looking at. I think it's also important to have parity of esteem, where that teachers and youth workers and other workers, CLD workers, or whoever it is that's working, whatever partners working with the school, has that clarity, so that they're all key, that their role is clear and that everybody's role is valued.
Yeah, that's great, Sheila. I was just going to ask, just because we're right at the start of the session, when we're using the term partners or partnership, what does that mean to you? Like, so who are you referring to? What kind of organisations would that be?
I think it can be a variety. Yeah, on you go.
Sorry, on you go, Sheila.
Yeah, no, I think it can be a variety of partners. Now, that can be third sector partners, organisations that work with schools. That can be a whole range of partners, depending on what's in that area, what's in that local area, what's around that school. If we're focusing around a school, it can be youth workers employed by the local authority. It can equally be youth workers employed through a third sector voluntary organisation. It can be workers employed through the church. I've certainly seen good examples of that, and of other youth work organisations in the area. I think there are a multitude of partners around that. If schools know their local area well, they will know the partners that can contribute to working with young people.
Do you want to add anything to that? Are you okay? Does that cover it all?
No, I think Sheila covered that really comprehensively. I was just going to highlight that, sometimes we see the youth workers as contracted either by the local authority CLD service or a third sector, but you also see youth workers employed directly in schools. And beyond that, within primary and ELC, you'll sometimes see people that have a family learning role, and again you see different models there as well. They're third sector partners providing that type of partnership work.
Yeah, that's great. Okay, we'll maybe move on to the next question, if that's okay. So it's quite helpful to hear about some of these kind of bespoke partnership programs that are meeting young people's needs. Are there examples of partnership working that you would like to highlight?
I think one of the examples that we would like to highlight, Laura, is thinking about those specific partnership programs that are about reintegrating young people into school and perhaps back into a full-time timetable in secondary schools. And the most successful programs that we've seen there, as what Sheila alluded to earlier about that partner or that person having a dedicated space in the school, a safe space for young people to go to where they can have those conversations about why there's attendance or their engagement in learning is why they're struggling with that, and also being upfront and including the young person's voice in designing those interventions. And I was really lucky to be on a secondary school inspection, and it was part of a focus group, and this young person was sharing with their youth worker that they had managed to stay in their English class for the whole of the session, and that was a success for them because they had struggled to it gave them anxiety, and their anxiety meant that they weren't always able to regulate their behaviour and stay in the class. And it was really lovely to witness that conversation where there'd clearly been some strategies that the youth worker had been developing with the young person, and they were talking about how they'd put them into practice, and then the youth worker was talking about really supporting that young person, praising them for doing that, and then kind of giving them that, okay, what's next, what's going to be your target now. So communication's really key to that, sharing those outcomes with the school and being really upfront with young people. If it's about reintegrating back into school, whether you're doing that in a group work setting or in a one-to-one, I think it's most successful when it's upfront with the young person. Sheila, have you got more examples of that?
Yeah, just a couple of examples to build on, Andrea, and that is about if the aim is integration of young people back into school. And I saw a piece of work earlier this year where that was the clear aim of it. But what was interesting about it was involving parents, and I met with parents and I met with the young people, and it was young people that were struggling to attend school because of some challenges they had in their lives around mental health issues and anxiety, and it was a real issue. The programme was very clear that it was about reintegration, but at their pace. It had to be something that was at their pace, and that the support they received would do that. Now, that led to an increase in positive destinations for those young people, and it had kind of life-changing impacts, and it did also increase attendance and re-engagement. So it wasn't just about attendance, it was about that re-engagement with school. And it helped those young people, and I know this because they told me, it was about improving their mental health. They felt because of that support at their pace really made the difference. But, I just want to re-emphasise that thing about the parents were key, and they recognised the difference that was making. Another quick example, if we've got time, was another one from another authority. It was a local youth work partnership with the school. Key here was the high level of commitment from the head teacher and the senior staff in the school to engage with the youth worker who was employed by the local authority but was based in the school. 80 young people re-engaged as a result of that engagement. And this was a school that was quite a high achieving school. And some of the young people that we're working with were struggling to achieve. But that engagement with the youth worker helped those 80 young people re-engage with school and improve life chances, I think, on the back of it.
Fantastic. Just before we move on to the next question, was there anything around those examples, both of you, in regards to service design, service approach, even service level agreements that existed?
I think certainly in the second one I referred to, yes, there was an agreement, and that's something I was going to mention later, because I think it's quite important. It goes back to what Andrea, I think, said at the beginning. It's important to what are your shared goals? What are we trying to achieve here, and how can we measure them? So a service level agreement or some kind of partnership agreement, I think, is quite key.
That's brilliant. So we're going to move on to a third question now. So are there other ways that interventions by partners are helping young people to maintain their attendance from your perspective?
Thanks, Jamie. I think the other area that we've seen we want to highlight is we've talked a wee bit about programmes that might be vocational or might be built around interests in sport or culture, but there are also interventions that youth workers specifically do, which is around supporting young people's mental health and well-being. And the evidence that we are seeing from our inspection evidence is that those kinds of programmes which are just supporting, supporting young people's mental health and are actually allowing young people to better manage their mental health and to regulate their behaviour. And as a result of being able to do that, then that is promoting their engagement further in their learning. And Sheila alluded to earlier about having that safe space and actually having a slightly different relationship with a youth worker than they might do with teaching staff, for example. And I can think of one young person who commented that the youth worker in their school was a really important person for them to share their personal circumstances with, and they felt for them it was important for them to be able to share their anxieties with them, and then not have to sit in a class looking at the person that they've just told something really confidential to. They wanted that separation. They had good relationships with the teaching staff, but just that slightly different relationship that they could build with a member of the youth work team in that school was important to them. So we see evidence of that support for mental health and well-being. And when young people can regulate their behaviour, they are coming into conflict with other people less, or when they do, they're able to get themselves out of that situation. So that relationship-based practice is really important. I would say also in the examples that we've seen, is investment in the training and the skills for the youth workers that are doing that type of work. And I know that one authority, for example, has trained their youth work staff in cognitive behaviour therapy at a low level, but to upskill what they do. I think, Sheila, you were going to mention an example around
Yeah,
that.
I think it's building on that example. I think it's important to remember that the reasons why young people don't attend school are complex, and they're not just about school. So if we're focusing on attendance in this discussion, I know there's a big focus on that nationally, and I'm sure lots of people on the call will know that the reasons why young people don't attend are complex. And in that, the situation you referred to, Andrea, it was around mental health and wellbeing, as was the example I gave earlier. And in that particular situation, the whole authority has a whole authority approach to using cognitive behaviour therapy and counselling with youth workers as leading that. And that has had a significant impact on young people being able to re-engage. And for some young people, that's allowed them to return to school. And in that situation, to pick up on what Jamie said earlier as well, it's that importance of those service level agreements, so everybody's clear what is it we're trying to achieve here. And if it is about re-engaging young people in school, then how do we measure that? And that needs to be done, I think, jointly. But it's a good example of understanding the reasons why young people don't attend.
Yeah, really strong messages around the whole mental health, which is obviously key, isn't it? So I guess if we move on to the another question now, I know that you've been talking about positive impacts for young people, and I'm just wondering, do you have evidence where that partnership working is including and extending to the wider family as well as the young person?
Yes, thanks, Laura.
Sorry, I was like, who am I asking that
No,
to?
it's okay.
Andrea.
No, it's all right. We'll just.
It's me again. It's me again.
I'll just add on.
I think we've used the term youth worker in throughout the chat that we've had this afternoon, and that covers a lot. We've also talked a wee bit about people that have family learning roles and so there's parental engagement is really important, as well as building those positive relationships. And because we've got those broad titles, you actually find that youth workers do quite a lot. Nobody will be surprised by that under that term. So I've seen examples where it's the youth worker in the school who is liaising with the family about a young person's attendance. A lot of that is about trust and building relationships over time. And I think consistency is key into that, and thinking about those approaches as early intervention and getting to know families and parents as on a continuing basis. I would also say we've seen examples that have extended to parents' own experiences of learning and having conversations with them about that. There are a few examples where local authorities have worked with the parents on their own learning aspirations. You know, it might start out as, I'd really like to help my young person with their homework, leads to a conversation about their own confidence and their own learning. So that allows engagement with the whole family. And if the whole family are engaged in learning or interested in that, then I think the attendance becomes much more important to them. Do you have anything you want to add to that, Sheila? Sorry, I keep jumping in.
No, not at all. I think it's important when we're thinking about family learning. I think where it works best, certainly from our experience, and I'm sure you would have seen this as well, Andrea, that it's about where there's an agreed approach. And sometimes if you can get that at a local authority level, then all the better. I think it works best when if there's some sort of leadership, strategic leadership behind it, so that if there's a family learning or parental engagement approach across a city or an area or whatever, I think that can be quite key. And I think that can work, certainly in my experience, that has worked. I've seen a particular example of that where it's worked really well. And that's about the importance of involving parents in their children's learning, which it's that that, as I say, the reasons why people don't attend are complex, and sometimes because of parents' experience of school, negative experience of school. And I'm thinking back to the family learning thematic that we did. I mean, this was just before COVID, and we had some good examples there of really embedding that kind of family learning approach where parents really working very closely with the school. And it was a particular school, primary school, who had found it very difficult to engage parents. But the new head teacher, she'd been there for certainly a couple of years when we had contact with her, but had really made it part of her real drive was to get parents involved in a meaningful way in the school and getting them engaged. And she certainly did that. And what was quite interesting about that particular example was after we went back after COVID, as we were coming out of COVID in 2021, and talked to them about the, how we'd identified it as an area of, good practice, interesting practice that was really improving children's engagement in their learning and probably attendance in that as well. But the interesting thing was that what they said after COVID, because they had that relationship with the families, they had no drop-off in children's attainment, virtually no drop-off, despite COVID and the challenges. And they said, the head teacher said to me, and it was down to the family learning approach, which was quite an interesting endorsement of that the difference that had made in that school for that community.
Yeah, so it's a really key message in there about, speaking to the young people, speaking to the parents, getting all of the partners involved. So it's been some really fantastic things that you've been sharing with us there. We are just coming towards the end, and I'm going to get you to just ask a bit of a summary in a moment. I'm just going to say to people just now, if you do have any questions, if you want to put them into the chat, and we're going to gather them up from there. So now is your chance to think about what the questions are you want to ask, and if you get them into the chat, we'll pick them up for you. So while people are doing that, I'm going to ask Andrea and Sheila, do you want to do a little bit of a summary of some of the key messages that you're thinking around partnerships and those impacts around attendance, if that's okay?
Thanks, Laura. I'm going to try and summarise what I think we've covered, and then Sheila can help me with that. We've talked about offering bespoke programmes for identified young people that are at risk of not attending, and as that's delivered in a variety of ways. An important part of that is ensuring that young people are heard and included in that process, and that the outcomes that you're trying to achieve are clearly defined and shared at the beginning. I think that's really important. I think that we also talked about the evidence we've seen where partners deliver programmes that are about emphasising that reintegration into school and focusing on that. And again, we would say that works best when that's really upfront with the young person and they know that that's what they're going to get the support to do. Supporting young people to build resilience and develop strategies that they can manage and regulate their behaviour. And obviously we spoke about in the context of supporting young people to maintain their mental health and well-being. And we spoke about building positive relationships with parents and carers to include them in supporting young people's attendance at schools. And again, that's done in a variety of ways. I think early intervention is also key to that. Right, Sheila, what did I miss?
You missed nothing. That was a very good summary. And, I think, that these are, I suppose, the key messages. I was thinking about the second one that you talked about a wee bit there, about delivering programmes who are at risk of not attending, but the emphasis on reintegration. And I think that's quite interesting because I've certainly seen examples, or one example I can think of last year on a secondary inspection where there was quite a number of young people who were having difficulty, there was no doubt, in the school. They weren't not attending, they were in the school, but they weren't going to any classes. So they were attending but not engaging, if you know what I mean. And I think that was a really interesting discussion with the school. It was in the context of an inspection, but it was about, yes, those young people are in the school, they're not running about in the community. However, they weren't actually engaging with their learning. And it's what strategies was the school then, and hopefully with their partners, thinking about how are we going to re-engage these young people. So it was almost hidden. They were there, they weren't non-attending, but they weren't learning. And I think that's quite key.
Fantastic. Thanks so much for that, both of you, and that overall summary. I think it really hits the mark on those sort of key messages. We have got a couple of questions in the chat. We'll try and get through a couple of them, hopefully, and give enough time to give answers. One of the first ones, and I'm going to merge it with one of the other ones that's here as well, was some of the support that was offered in regards to the first question. I think it was an example you gave, Sheila. What did it look like? And also just linking that again to the sort of the primary school specifically you mentioned, Sheila, like what the primary school actually did to engage parents in a meaningful way, so the practical way that they did that. So a bit of what does the support look and what does the practical approaches look like that are used, I suppose?
I think if I can take the primary school one first, the approach was getting parents involved in learning with their children. You know, actually learning with their children and supporting their children. So it was a family learning approach as opposed to just, no, I don't mean just parental engagement, but it was a family learning approach and getting parents to work alongside the school in supporting, for example, homework. And the school had set up a whole range of things around parents being able to come in. And it was, I suppose, the key to this was making that school accessible to parents, because it wasn't before. And I can remember the head teacher saying to me, if they're not with you, they're against you. And there was certainly a lot of that in the local community, a lot of bad feeling about the school, you know, for whatever reason. And I think the head teacher had very skillfully re-engaged parents and had also brought along some parents who'd been quite challenging in the past, along as learning assistants, as voluntary learning assistants. And once they were involved, they understood it from a different perspective. So it was a whole range of strategies. But I think the key to this was they had very good evidence of, for example, reading ages improving dramatically through the support they'd been achieving. They also worked with a CLD worker who was working with the families. She had that relationship with the families as well. It was a whole system approach. I suppose it's one of the best examples I've probably seen of that. My original example, I think I was talking about that, I suppose, again, that joint planning of what you're trying to achieve with young people and having clear goals, which I think I maybe talked about at the beginning. Sorry, I've given a few examples and I can't remember exactly which one it was, but I think it goes back to the same basis of having a clear starting point and that you're all on the same page of what you're trying to achieve.
Yeah, that's great. Okay, so I'm going to come on with the next question, which is around the curriculum offer. So it's talking about where you've seen partnership working that has supported the creation of a learning environment and curriculum offer that fosters attendance and engagement. So where have you seen that as a kind of example, or could you give any examples of it? Who wants to answer that? Andrea, will I go to you, seeing as Sheila got the last one?
Yeah. I mean, I think I spoke a wee bit about earlier about programmes that are built around young people's kind of vocational aspirations or their interests. So we've seen programmes, for example, partnerships with local sports clubs. Some of the football teams are involved. It becomes really important to that young person that they don't lose their place on that programme, and that becomes a motivation for them, because that's engaging with them, and there's a few examples of that. There's also a few rural examples where that local partnership has been with a farm business and all the jobs that come with that, and knowing the rural context and knowing that lots of young people from that school might go into agricultural type roles, that was really meaningful for those young people to have the opportunity to go out and spend time on that farm. So a lot of that can depend on the aspirations of the young people and the context. But where it's something that is really important to young people, and sport can be one of those motivators. Young people are really motivated by making sure that they continue to be part of that programme. Some of the programmes I've come across set the tone really well for expected behaviour and engagement, and there are, and young people are able to be engaged in that and agreeing to that up front. And it's not the case that if they step out of line, they're off the programme and that's it. But there's a conversation with them about the expectations, but there's also support to meet those expectations. And that's the type of learning environment. So it's got a really high bar. We need you to be here ready to go on time, engaged. We will be reporting back to your school on what you're achieving while you're here. If you step out of line, you might not be able to come, but no young person was feeling that they would be getting thrown off or chucked. There was setting a standard, but support to meet that standard is the type of learning environment that that we see with some of the partnership programmes. Would you agree with that, Sheila?
I would, yeah, and just as you're speaking, Andrea, I could think of one that I saw where it was an example of where the school was working very closely with the cadets, and there was a lot of young people engaged in it, and a lot of young people who were engaged in it weren't ones that necessarily were engaging all that well. The school might have been having some difficulty in terms of how they related to school and how they were achieving. And that was quite key because it was the link between the school and the community, because they were part of it in the school and they could develop leadership roles, they could develop a whole range of things, and it also linked with the community. And it had that, I suppose it had that sense of pride, I suppose I could kind of call it civic pride, if you want, that they were part of that, and then they took part in a whole range of things. And having met with a group of young people who were involved in that, that was really key about what they were getting out of it. And these were young people in first and second year in particular who were really well engaged in it, and there was an opportunity for progression right through the school and the link into community.
And I guess what's really key for me there and everything you've said is about that different offer. So, it's about wherever that school is, whatever's in that community. You've mentioned, rural there, you mentioned sports, you've mentioned, so it's about that kind of what is in the particular community that a school's sitting in and what partners are there and what that wider community interest in, where I think that messaging's coming across really clear. So thank you for that. I think we've got time for one more question and then we're going to highlight some resources. So I know there's some questions in the comments which are about resources, so we're going to come on to that in a minute. I think we've got one more question to ask though, Jamie.
Yeah, I'm just going to try and make the question have a couple of parts to it. So it was mainly that idea of how we track the impact of parental involvement in family learning. Is the result of that absence rates? Is it reduced lateness? But also that kind of bigger picture when it comes to partnership. What if people don't have access to youth workers? How do they, identify that? And Laura, you touched upon that there, a wee bit of resources, but is there any sort of advice you would give around those two things, tracking impact of parental involvement and mapping partners?
I think, again, it goes back to having that, your key aim of what you're trying to do clearly so you can measure it. I mean, I suppose you touched on earlier about people saying, well, what if we don't have youth workers attached to schools? I mean, across the country, there's a great deal more that we're seeing in terms of youth workers being involved in schools, either employed by the local authority or someone else. But it's about schools knowing their community and what the partners are that they can draw on. And a lot of schools are really good at that. Is, how well do you know your community? What is it that is in this community that can help work with young people in terms of their aspirations, in terms of a whole range of things? So I think it's about knowing what's there as a starting point.
Fantastic, thank you. The other questions we have, we'll take note of them and hopefully get you a response to them when we do our kind of follow-up and send out the information we've captured today alongside the recording. So please don't think we're not going to provide you that answer. One of the things we want to share with you today as well, as a part of that sort of offering from Education Scotland in regards to supporting and improving attendance in the country, is our new campaign in regards to improving attendance. I'm just going to bring up my screen just now so you can see some of the elements of that. But this is a campaign that's been running for the last couple of weeks and been co-designed by a range of different stakeholders and practitioners across the system. And there's various elements there about understanding the issues, plans and policy and effective use of data. One of the key parts which will be launched tomorrow at 8 AM is in specifically regards to partnership and multi-agency working when it comes to improving attendance. So this part is not live just currently, but it will be tomorrow morning and it will be in that part in regards to the main site. In regards to the resources this offers, we have actually created, through that consultation with stakeholders, schools and wider organisations, a range of tools that can be used to essentially help partners work more closely with schools, and schools to know what partners can offer, what their roles and responsibilities are. And essentially, by everybody here getting a little sneak peek of this, has these three parts, and the parts are about the principles that practitioners have and what they are to improve attendance, the idea of having a community mapping approach through the tool we've developed, and the six steps to create an effective partnership and what those steps are. And just for the last few minutes, I'll just show you some of these things. We've got some visual aids that help us with it. Our principles talk specifically around the things around about the awareness, the bigger picture of what causes attendance issues, the idea of early intervention, and kind of summarised quite neatly in our sketch note here. But we have a full list of principles that are accessed via the link, but also on the page itself. And just to highlight, these principles have been created by the system, by stakeholders that are involved in different aspects of education. And some of these will recognise when the things that they're saying about the barriers and understanding around that. But we believe that if you want to have effective partnerships, you need to have these principles in place. The second part of the resources is the community mapping tool, which essentially is a tool that allows you to think about what exists in your community. It's just exactly like Sheila said there, that awareness of what exists and being aware of the communities in which you serve. And it's part two of this sort of process. Understanding what's there within your own setting, what's in with your people and young people's families and their own characteristics, but ultimately to map that in a successful way to see what assets are there for you to bring in and what partners you can involve in a sort of meaningful and way of parity. And our third part of that offering is our 6 steps to effective partnership. And again, when we summarise this here, it talks about things around about data. It talks about the idea of having conversations with the child or the family, things around funding, where money's spent and allocated. And we've got, again, quite a consistent tool that's available for that in regards to our sort of sketch note, which summarises all the different 6 steps in a very kind of visual way that makes it easy and accessible for those that are going to utilise it. But to make it even more consistent and more sustainable, we have our full checklist, which is provided as part of this offering. And essentially what it does is it highlights the steps you need to go through to make sure that your partnership is created in an effective way and also a sustainable way. And each of these steps is kind of highlighted here. So these resources will be going live as of tomorrow morning. There's other ones that are additional, such as we've got a podcast that will be done in collaboration with YouthLink Scotland around about what attendance is and how it can be meaningfully attempted to be overcome, the difficulties with it through partnership approaches, and some other sort of resources that can help schools and partners work together. But it was just to highlight that, and we'll make sure that that is something that goes out with the correspondence when that goes out tomorrow. But ultimately, it will live in this page, which is improving attendance on Scotland, and we'll put that in the chat.
Yeah, that's great. So it's just now down to me to round up the session. First of all, I'd just like to say a big thank you to Andrew and Sheila for helping agreeing to do this session with us and for giving up their time to step forward and answer all of the questions that we wanted to answer. So thank you very much for that. We're just about to put an evaluation link into the chat. We would ask that you all just try and take 2 minutes of your day to fill in the evaluation if you can, just before you go. We do have those 2 minutes left at the end of our session, so hopefully you can use that. As Jamie said, he gave a really quick roundup of those resources there, but there's lots in there, and there's also the other sections as well, which can support you in terms of some of the questions that you've asked in terms of the evidence and how you're collating information and all of those kind of areas. So please do look on the other sections as well as our partnership section. And as I said, that they'll be published at 8 AM tomorrow morning. So I'm just putting a link to the evaluation in the chat, although I think Jamie's just done it. We're so good. Dream team. So yeah, if you could fill in that evaluation just before you go, and just a really big thank you from us in terms of coming along today and being part of this critical conversation. So if you can feed back in the evaluation your thoughts, then that we can help analyse and use that for future sessions, which will be great. And as Jamie said, we will be taking the questions that have appeared in the chat, and we can try and come back to people on those that we can, and it can certainly be used to shape some of our thinking as we're going forward too. So a big thank you here from us, and I hope you enjoy the rest of our day. And yeah, I hope that it's been really useful information that we've heard from those summaries. So thank you very much, Angie and Sheila. So thanks, everybody.
Thank you.